looking at the wrong camera already. Hello and welcome to Devoxx UK, where we are talking to people in the Build Propulsion Lab. I wanted to talk to my good friend Sam. Basically, I picked out people from the audience and speakers who I want to speak to. Hello, Sam.
Hi.
And I wanted to talk to Sam about career and community. My first question was, and this is something we've talked about a whole bunch, like how can the community, like the Java user groups, like conferences and those sorts of things, how can they help your career?
There's so many ways, but I think the most important way, because a lot of people look at communities, conferences, things like that, and they're like, I might want to do a talk, I might not, but I'm not looking to be stage famous. And so therefore, I'm not going to give that talk, I'm not going to write that blog post, I'm not going to commit to that open source project. But if we look at it as what skills do we need in order to elevate our career, so maybe I want to get a promotion to be a principal engineer, and part of that is that I'll now have to give presentations to the board or the exec team or things like that. But I've never done that in a work setting, so I've never been able to do a company update or a team update. And so maybe my manager says, well, I can't get the promotion because they haven't seen me have that skill, but they're not giving me the opportunity to do it at work. Well, then speaking at a conference, I can showcase those skills. Or leading a team, maybe we haven't got that opportunity. We'll get involved in open source and lead a team around a project. So there's loads of ways you can use the community to showcase that you have those skills or develop them. And then when you're going for that negotiation of a salary increase or an up and promotion or anything like that, you have something to tangibly show the community through the community instead of always having to wait for the opportunity at work.
I quite often talk in my career advice for programmers presentations about having a portfolio, because certainly, at pretty much all stages in your career, it's very difficult to present in 2 pages of CV or resume like who you are and what you're good at. And I always find things like, I talk about portfolio, so GitHub, Stack Overflow, presentations, user groups, blogs, things like that, as a way to not just make you stand out, because it does, but like you say, demonstrate those skills that you can talk about them in an interview, but if people have actually seen you on video or seen you demonstrate those skills, it makes a big difference.
I always say that a lot of the time, the people that make decisions about your career actually never see your code, and they should hear your name, right? And so whether it's the fact that you can talk about an interview and they've seen you, or the fact that your boss says, oh, I'd love to give you that promotion, but my boss's boss has to sign you off and they don't really know who you are, so you have to up your internal presence at a company. I hate that. Well, now you can do that with these things so they hear your name, right?
I think one of the things I find interesting about these kinds of things is that in some ways it can be easier to create a presence outside of your own company. Like when I first started talking at user groups and conferences and stuff, people come up to me, they're like, oh my God, you're Trisha Gee. And yet the companies I work for, they're like, well, you're just Trisha, you just write code. So it's quite a good way to become semi-famous and to get your name out there to those people who are making those kinds of decisions.
So like utilizing it to advance yourself as opposed to just being famous.
Just being famous. I like just being famous. It's quite nice.
I like when people are like, oh, you set me up. I'm like, what did I do?
And I wanted to ask you specifically, because you work on Devoxx UK, you've been involved with Devoxx UK for quite a while.
Yeah, almost every year, so 11 years.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Started out as a volunteer, and I grew my career through Devoxx.
Exactly. So I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking to Louis, who's been to a whole bunch of Devoxxes. I said, did you come to the first one? And he was like, when was that? I'm like, 11 years.
2014.
2014. And it was like, was it really?
It's really, really small.
It was about 500 people.
Yeah.
We brought our own sandwiches.
Yes.
Because we had no catering.
We used to have the expo hall upstairs in where the keynote sessions happen now.
That's right.
And I used to man the London Java community booth and try and rally the community.
Yes.
And then, fast forward 10 odd years, and now I've got it.
So how did this help your career, being involved with the conference?
Yeah, well, hugely. So even though obviously this is a very technical conference, I am not technical. I can code hello world and that is about it. But I always thought I had to be a software developer to advance my career. I'm originally from South Africa, and so I tried the whole self-study, self-teach thing. I was very dyslexic and no one told me about an IDE. And so I was in Notepad trying to do things. And someone said to me, oh, why don't you go to a community event? And I went to my first event with the London Java community, which is very strange because I was not programming in Java at all. But I very quickly realized how amazing the technical community was for coming together, for sharing knowledge, for being so inclusive as well. Like, it wasn't technical, people would explain things to me. And then I grew my career with bringing those lovely humans together. So I realized I didn't have to be a software developer. and I had skills in other spaces. So I had the skills in the event organizing, in helping people connect and communicate, and have grown my career off that half of technology, which is still a very important half. I just don't like the trades of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think as developers, we can sometimes be a bit snobby about, well, we're developers and developers are special. I think it's really important for us to embrace those other skills, like communicating with people is kind of helpful. But the event management stuff is like so very different and takes a certain set of skills that someone like I just do not have the patience for that kind of thing. And yet we need people like you who can glue stuff together. You understand the community, you understand developers, you understand what we care about, but you do the stuff that you do
I
not
call
want
myself
to
like
do.
the translator, The amounts of times I'm in an office situation or something like that, and I've got like marketing or sales complaining about the dev team, and then on the other side I've got the devs complaining about the sales, the marketing team, and I'm like, you realize you are actually complaining about the same thing, you're just speaking two different languages. It does make it clear for me that I can translate between the two, but most of the time just teaching that empathy around, for both sides, on let's try communicating this in a different way. Like we were joking last night about how many acronyms we have and who's got them, and now acronyms are kind of going through the wash and being reused. So 10 years ago it meant X, and now it means something completely different. And if someone programmed with that 10 years ago, they're not going to understand the acronym. And we need to sort of kind of stay away from that because it starts to feel uninclusive when it's not supposed to be.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk a bit about communication as well. See, this is a nice segue. We've talked about raising profile, we talked about speaking at conferences and things like that. So I wondered if you had any tips for if you're submitting a talk, use it via the CFP to something like Devoxx UK. If you've got any tips for people to get their CFP noticed?
Yes. So the first thing I would say is never underestimate the power of a good title. So our CFP committee will look through every single session. But a catchy title does actually get you noticed, and then they will read the submission to see if it's worth the talk, obviously. The one thing though, if you're going to use humor in your talk titles, please run it past some other people and not just your friends. Sometimes we think we're just being funny and then it comes across a bit offensive or something like that because we didn't realize. So running it past people that don't look, act and sound like you is very, very useful. So that's number one.
I had a talk called Java 8 in Anger, and I ran it past, so I would never really know if some things are Britishisms or if they're global. I ran it past a couple of Americans and they're like, yeah, we know what that means. I started giving this talk and everyone came up to me and was like, I thought you were going to be coding really angrily. I'm like, no, in anger means like in real life. They're like, could you have called it in real life?
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay. So the next one was called Java 9 in the real world.
You see, I would have understood you not being angry, but it being a bit of a rant.
Yes, and
about that sort of anger conversation.
So it's important to run it past other people.
Yeah. So titles are very good. Then abstract. A lot of people fall victim to almost writing their whole talk as an abstract, feeling like they have to explain everything they're going to talk about. So the CFP committee will really know what they're after. The problem with really long abstracts is one, that takes a long time to read. Two, a lot of the time we get lost in, well, what are you actually trying to say? And so that can mark you down. And so I'd say try keep it short to the point. If you are going to do a bit of a longer one, because maybe it's really technical, have a like TLDR, quick summary, use bullet points, things like that. And then the biggest thing I would say, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I think people don't get accepted to speak, is they might do a really good title, an abstract, but it's not clear what the audience is going to get out of a talk. And if we look at Devoxx UK, so we had over 1,000 submissions and only 180 session slots. People will submit sometimes similar abstracts, and we're more likely to accept a session where we understand exactly what the outcome of it is for the audience member. So even if you're just putting it in the notes to the committee, I'm going to do this talk and this is my aim, it's so helpful to understand what you're after.
Yeah, yes, all of those things there's really good tips. So I always think about it from my point of view. I think that the title is for the schedule. When people are kind of looking through the schedule and they never read the abstract. They want to see, this is the talk I want to go to. The abstract is for the program committee and for a person who has to decide between two talks. They're going to want to read the abstract and see what's there. And then when you're a speaker submitting to the CFP, it's nice if there's a box which is specifically for the program committee to say things like, I've given this talk before, or it's a new talk, both of which are valid, because sometimes you want something which is polished and sometimes you want something which is new. I've given this talk before, this is what I want the audience to get out of it, and so you can have this conversation with the
And actually
program
doing
committee.
that whole resubmitting of talk. So one thing I would say is, number one, it's definitely okay to resubmit a talk. You spend so much time writing a session. Giving it once is
A waste of time.
And then two, also, it doesn't matter how big the conference is, the 5, 10, 100 people in the room aren't the only people that are going to want to hear this, and not everyone goes to YouTube later to watch the recording. And the third thing is you can always be improving. I know when we spoke years and years ago, you'd always say how much you'd give the same session, but it would never be the same because you were, improving it. And so the one thing I would say to anyone looking to talk is, if you ask people for feedback about your talk when they're in the room, we're all lovely humans, and chances are you didn't do as badly as you thought you did.
Right.
And it is fun. So usually it was great. And so if you want tangible feedback, invite someone to your session with that in mind, and then think about the feedback you want. So you might be fine with the topic, but you're like, what is my stage presence like? Then the person doesn't even have to know the subject matter, but you're asking them, how do I stand? How do I hold the microphone? On the flip side, if you're doing something technical, say you're doing something for a junior developer, inviting your CTO or the head of technology to come watch your talk and give you feedback, they haven't been a junior developer in about 1,000,000 years. And so they won't actually tell you if that hit the mark. So inviting then a junior to come in and go, you know what, that went completely over my head. You need to bring it down a bit. Or it was a little basic. You can actually bring it up. Developers know more than you think, or whatever it may be. So inviting someone, but then also what is the outcome of the feedback you want is really important as well.
Yeah. I really love user groups for introduction to type talks, because user groups, well, A, the people who turn up are the people who want to see that talk, but B, you get a whole bunch of people from juniors to seniors who have missed a particular boat on a particular topic, and they want to see the introduction to, even these days people want to see. So the other day I was struggling with AWS because I've never really used it before. There's always someone who doesn't know something about something, and user groups are a great way to sort of try that content out.
I suppose going to that talk as well, a lot of the things I hear from people who want to speak at conference is, it's either the what do I talk about type stuff, or the I'm not an expert thing.
Right.
And the one thing I will say to that is, number one, you're not the experts. There's always someone that knows more than you. But if we think about it on, we're all on a different journey, right? So if I was a startup founder and I went to the talk about how Oracle made their first billion, it's interesting, but I want to know how to survive the first year without going bankrupt. And so often we look and we're like, I want to be like this, I want to be as clever as Trisha, or as, all these different people, and we forget that there are people coming up behind us that actually see you as I want to know what they know. And so it's completely fine to not be an expert, but it's also putting that in your submission. This is aimed at juniors, this is a mid-level, this is for seniors, this is what I'm planning to get, so that when people come, you're not getting those, oh my God, what if I can't answer the question? Because you're not supposed to know the answer to something that's, about the latest version of Java if your talk is about how to maintain legacy applications, right? And so that's also something to be aware of when you're doing that submission is, who's it for?
Yeah. And who's it for, and what can I give them? So my thing I always feel like with speakers, with any job actually, everyone has something to give, right? And when I was talking about high performance stuff, I'm like, I'm not Martin Thompson, I don't understand this stuff. I'm like, no, but you're not Martin Thompson, you have a different thing to give to the audience. And if you're not an expert, and sometimes it's terrifying when the experts are in the audience and they look at you, but you can use that as well. You can be like, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that these folks really do, so come and speak to them. So you always have something that you bring to it.
The other thing I'd also say is, I'm sure people listening, whatever, will have that moment where you're struggling with something and someone's explaining to you and you're just not getting it. And then someone else turns around and they explain it to you and you're like, you get that aha moment of, oh my gosh, I understand. And it's that same thing of well, I'm not going to talk about Spring because Josh Long speaks about Spring all the time. Well, actually, the way you explain the problem might be the way the person needs to hear it. And so understanding that just because there is, the well-known names in certain places, the way you articulate things is exactly how some people need to actually hear that talk.
Exactly, and these topics are so big. Spring, for example, huge topic, absolutely huge topic. And so you watch Josh Long do his live demo, creating a Spring Boot application from literally nothing. You're like, oh my God, the guy's a magician. But you watch someone else going, look, I'm working in a big enterprise, and we use this part of Spring in this specific way to solve this problem. That's a completely different angle on exactly the same topic.
Yeah,
works really well.
I also think when you're thinking about, a lot of people think they need to also have a polished solution when they submit. And I'm sure a lot of people test this. If someone could tell me the 5 things that failed, so I don't do the 5 things, I'd be so happy. So like also submitting talks that are just like, this is all the things that went wrong. One, you might save someone time. Two, they might inspire someone else to do a talk on, oh, actually, I know the one right way. You can work together on it. So it's also like showcasing failure in community is amazing, and it's embraced so well in the technical community.
We've talked about that a lot in the Seville Java, well, in the London Java community and the Seville Java user group as well. We've me and my husband been trying to get people to come in and talk about entrepreneurial failures, because you read books that says like, you know, for every entrepreneur, they have failed probably 5 times before they succeeded. But they don't talk about the failures, they talk about the success. But that's, you don't learn from the success, you learn from the failures.
I want to see the human side. And I used to, when I first started giving talks, I never really introduced myself, because what do you want to know about me? Like, here's the content. And then I get a few people coming up to me afterwards and being like, that's nice, but I'm not technical, or but this. And then as soon as I introduced myself a little bit, it was like, you know, I don't come from a technical background. I didn't go to university. I am dyslexic. And not in an oh way, it was me way, but, you know, kind of showcasing all human. Like we've discussed, you know, all the things that you worry and get scared about and all the rest of it, you know. So people will be like, oh, I can be like that, but we're just all human at the end of the day. We all have fears, and I know almost every single speaker I know gets nervous before they get on stage, you know. So
100%. You have no idea how worried I am about the talk with Holly this afternoon. Like, okay, well, we haven't quite finished everything yet. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I did a lightning talk at lunchtime, and still 15 minutes, still freaked out before, still almost ran over. I had to leave a section out. It was all fine, because also no one knows what you were meant to say. So we can only get better.
I think that the thing that I've learned from doing the speaking and conferences and stuff is that the more you do it, the better you get at it, obviously. But like you say, the audience really wants you to succeed, and they're kind of like, they don't know that you missed a whole bunch of stuff out, or that you answered that question wrong, or that you've given this talk 700 times before. They're just like, I'm just in it for me. I just want to know.
And we all learn and grow, and you know, the person I was 10 years ago isn't the person I am today, and the knowledge you had 5 years ago isn't the knowledge you have today. And so, as you say, if you answer a question wrong, or maybe sort of explain something, and 6 months back you look at the talk and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's how I built that application when there was this easier way. We're all learning and growing together, right?
And then
you do the talk about like how I took something that took 5 hours to run, 2 hours 5 years later, or whatever it may be.
No, exactly. I do have people coming up to me going, I couldn't do what you do, I'm not you. I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't me 10 yees ago either. We all have to start somewhere.
And please don't be me, be you.
Exactly, exactly. That's exactly right. That's the best thing. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Oh no, but I forgot to mention that me and Kevin just did the 97 Things talk, and we didn't invite you to talk about community on the 97 Things talk.
The nice thing about Devoxx was there's so many people from the 97 Things book at the conference. I think you would almost have like a whole day of tracks just covering everyone. So it was not.
But it would have been a good opportunity for you to come, because in 97 Things you talked about the value of community for your career.
It's such a good book, and a lot of the things we've kind of discussed already were like mentioned in that extract, and a few extra fun bits. So.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'll do one looks at the camera.
Bye. Bye.